All right. Looks like we're live. Let's see. So I have the chat window up in theory. Let's see how this works. So for those of you already on, thank you so much for joining. This is semi-official pseudo dry run. So I have real content, hopefully a pretty entertaining time. But also I'm totally figuring out how all of this works. So bear with me as we get in the weeds here. I got about a bajillion lights on me right now, so I'm going to take off this jacket real quick. Show off that Hawaii Volcanoes National Park shirt. Very apt. Okay. Cracking open the game now. Let's see if we can get this thing kind of teed up. So why don't we start off with a little bit about the stream. So first of all, hello and welcome. Thank you for coming. This week we'll be exploring Big Bend National Park. So each week I'll pick a new national park to explore. We'll visit some of the big attractions, talk about the park, a little bit of its history, and really enjoy the views from the sky. So the whole thing will be based on Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, with some interludes of photos from the park and bits of history and stories and that sort of thing. As we get in the rhythm, it'll be a little bit more storytelling, a little less technical learning, but you gotta start somewhere. Tell you what, why don't I do this? Pull that up so you can actually see me. Hello there. All right. So the game is loading as we speak. So give it just a second to tee up here. For those of you with a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, you should be able to join along for the flight. I have uploaded a flight plan, so it's a PL and file for Microsoft. So if you have the game and you would like to fly along with us for the time, go ahead and drop into that Google Drive. Let me know if you have any issues accessing it. You should be able to just load up right in your game, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second here. Oofda. Please tell me I don't have to do this right now. Okay. No, Microsoft Flight Simulator, don't do this to me. All right, cool. Well, this will be fun. So we'll give this a second to go. This is why we dry run these things. The good news is that I have plenty of other content to talk through. So we'll just jump into that a little bit earlier, and we'll get to the actual flying part in a minute. Anyone try out that drive file? Drop in the chat if you're able to get them. Link in the description. Thanks. All right. So, all right. A couple disclaimers before we get too far into this. So, I'm ignoring a lot of laws about flying in national parks. You actually can fly around national parks with certain rules around it, but we're going to just blow through all of those. I'm also ignoring a lot of safety concerns. Don't try this at home. We will adhere to the laws of physics, but we're going to push it in a couple of places. And yes, I am a pilot, but I'm going to take full advantage of this being a simulator. So should be a pretty fun adventure. I've done a bunch of research and preparation for this stream, again, on Big Bend National Park. And so everything that you hear tonight is, as far as I could get valid sources for, is valid information. The way that I'm approaching this is to take the information that I learned and synthesize it and present it back onto the Wikipedia page. So for those of you without Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you would like to follow along, everything that I talk about is already in the Big Bend National Park wiki page. In fact, if you go on there and look at the history, you'll see Jules Altus. It's all the way down. The goal being that it's nice to do a kind of adventure together and fly around, but I really wanted to make sure that this information is given back to the community in some sort of lasting way. And so the end result being that all of the news sources, photos, information are all added to to the wiki page. So if you haven't pulled that up, it's kind of cool, and you can kind of poke around the photos. Spoilers in some ways, but in other ways, it's a lasting document, so it's not too many plot twists in it. The other thing is it gives a chance to be fact-checked, and if you notice anything that was incorrect in my presentation of the information or in the facts themselves, please don't use this as your source of truth, but instead use the sources within Wikipedia as your source of truth. So if you know something that's incorrect or needs to be updated, feel free to hop on Wikipedia and go and make some edits to it. The wiki community often says kind of a bit of a slogan, be bold. And the idea with that is that if you see something that's wrong, grammar that needs to be fixed, photos that are misaligned, anything that could be improved, just go ahead and make the updates. And cite things, of course. All right, so without further ado, I'm Jules Altus, and I'll be your pilot for this evening. And as always, thank you for being my co-pilot. All right, so this is still loading, which is sort of a pain, but we can still talk about Big Bend at a high level. So a couple of things that we're hoping to do today. The flight plan itself, which I will pull this up and see if I can get this a little bit bigger. Oh, it looks like all right. Microsoft Flight Simulator is small, not that anyone cares what that has on it. So what I'm doing here is actually streaming an app called ForeFlight from my iPad. ForeFlight is what I would use if I were to actually go flying somewhere. I would use this as a way of seeing where the plane is around the United States. So if I zoom out here, you can actually see these are the maps of the U.S. with, actually I got a bunch of traffic floating around here. Let's turn it off. And what I've done is I went and built out a flight plan for us to fly through. This is the same one that people would have downloaded from that link. So we're going to start today and actually fly out of Lajitas International Airport, which is just to the, I'll try and point out here, if you look, there's that kind of sensitive nesting area, that light blue line just beneath the airport. That traces the outline of Big Bend National Park. And since we're waiting for this to finish anyway, I will use this to pull up the actual park map. You can kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, trial number 2. That makes that kind of distinctive shape of Texas. So if I zoom out like this, I'll turn off this one so you can kind of see. When we look at Texas as a state, that bend that occurs and this outline here is where the national park is. So we're going to take off from Lajitas International Airport. We'll fly a little bit south to Santa Elena Canyon, bop over to this historic district of Castellón. From there, we'll fly over and check out some of the neat trails and hiking that you could do in the area, Mule's Ears, and the Mule's Ear Springs. We'll check out one of the other 2 big canyons to go and see when you go, and you should go to Big Bend. So the first one being Santa Elena Canyon. The second one is this Mariscal Canyon. From there, we'll fly up to the Rio Grande Village, talk a little about the border crossing, because the entire park follows the national border. It has some pretty interesting setup because of that. We'll fly our way up to the Persimmon Gap, which has some very interesting and incredibly detailed geological history, which I will gloss over, but you can go and look more into if you're curious to learn more. From there, we'll fly down to Panther Junction, where headquarters is, and then we'll finish our trip at the Chisos Mountains, which are one of the kind of big parts of this this national park. All right, let's see how we're doing on this game. For those of you who don't use checklists all the time, I would highly recommend them. So I'm gonna add a checklist item to make sure game is updated. All right. pull it back in here. Okay. Good signs, good signs. All right, so a little bit about Big Bend. We talked about where we're going to fly today. Big Bend National Park is an American national park located in West Texas. It borders Mexico. It has national significance because it's the largest protected area of the Chihuahuan Desert topography and ecology in the United States. So the Chihuahuan Desert, this is kind of the segment of the U.S. that we protect. And it's named, again, like I mentioned, for the Bend in the Rio Grande. The park protects more than 1,200 species of plants, 450 species of birds, 56 species of reptiles, and 75 species of mammals. We'll talk a little bit about those as we fly around. Additional park activities, should you go, include scenic drives, programs led by park rangers, and stargazing. The area itself is rich with cultural history. There's archaeological sites dating back tens of thousands of years, and more recently pioneers, ranchers, miners. The Chisos Mountains, as I mentioned, are in the park, and they're the only mountain range in the United States fully contained in the boundary of a national park. There's other geological features, sea fossils, dinosaur bones, volcanic dikes. I have this more later in the notes, but there was a comment that it's a geologist's dream and nightmare, because it kind of has a lot of stuff going on under the hood. What else? About 800,000 acres. Again, that international border causing a lot of interesting arrangements because you have to deal with the whole other country when you're setting up your park, which we'll talk a bit more about. Yeah, so that's kind of the 2-second version on Big Bend. All right, let's drop in here. So we're going to go to Lajitas. And I'm actually going to use my iPad instead for my map. If you loaded up the flight plan, it would show up in the corner for you, and you can use that. It works just as well. And today we're going to be taking ourselves in a, we'll just use this one. This is fine. All right. And we are going to go to, as you may recall, a couple of nights ago was a full moon. So October 31st, 2020 was a full moon. So we're going to start there, and we're going to go clear skies and kick ourselves off here. All right, so while that loads up, let's talk for, okay, one quote that I pulled out, and I was going to drop this in the wiki page, but it felt a little pointed, but I think it was funny. I think you guys would enjoy. There was a NPS historian and author, Arthur R. Gomez, and he was the author of a 1990 historic resources study of Big Bend. And so his quote about the park was, according to local legend, after the making of heaven and earth was accomplished, the creator took all the remaining stone and rubble and tossed it in the remote corners of West Texas. So, rather amusing way to summarize the park. And when we're flying around, you'll see a little bit of that kind of stuff going on. So. All right. Let's see if we can get ourselves teed off on the iPad too. Okay. Catching up in the chat here. Okay, so now experiment with tech number 2. I have a head tracking device set up, which is pretty cool because when I look around, it'll actually look around the plane for me. The risk with a device like that is it could be very nauseating for the audience. So every time I look over at my notes or read the chat, it's going to be like that kind of thing. So after the stream, there will be a feedback form that goes out. If that was something that made you grab the barf bag, then please let me know. That's something that I'd want to fix. But it is handy for looking around. So. All right, quick time check, only 15 minutes late. So we're going to do a couple of things that you probably shouldn't do and actually turn off our avionics and our master and see if we can still fly this plane. Second thing we're going to do is get our flight tracking set up. So you'll notice now that what I'm doing is I'm actually, it says connected to flight events. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the location of the plane in sim and sending it to the iPad in the exact same way that it would send it to the iPad if I were in an actual plane. And so that dot is where I am relative to the map of Texas. So as we're flying around, you can actually see where I'm going to. So we'll see. Hopefully that stays loaded. Oh. I can't tell if the iPad streaming is actually working or not. It very much appears to be frozen on my side. Hold on, let's give that another round. Okay. The VFR map, that's visual flight rules. Okay. Trying to figure out why the iPad isn't showing up on the screen. Doesn't make any sense, but let's try flipping back to the splash screen and see if it reloads it. Nope, no dice. That's too bad. It's a little disorienting to fly around the park without it. All right, then let's do this instead, so you can at least see where we're going as we fly around. I'm going to drop out of this one and load up the flight plan. Load, let's see. Okay. Oop, that's ironic. Okay, well, I guess I get to test my own flight plan. Oh, I have to load it from the beginning. Okay. Excellent. All right, back to the world map. This time we load. Okay. Let's make sure. So we got VFR. That's that general shape of what I was just showing earlier. Get this loading now. I'll have to change the date, but that's fine. All right, well, while that loads up, let's talk a little bit about the park and some of the geography and climate of it. So the area is classified as this hot, semi-arid climate. And the park itself shows a lot of contrast between ends of the extremes. So it's dry and hot late spring, summer days that'll exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit in some of the lower elevations. But then winters can be mild or even sub-freezing temperatures occasionally. All right. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the VFR map so you guys can see where we're flying, because I think that'll make it a lot less confusing. I would have had the map of the park is a little more fun because you can see the mountains as you fly around it, but that's right. At least I can see it still. Okay, so let's get going here. Okay, we rolling. So for those of you who haven't seen this before, you can switch between two different views on here. One where you're looking behind the plane, and then a second where you're kind of sitting in the cockpit itself. I will use primarily the view where we're not my greatest takeoff ever. That's right. I'll use primarily the view where we're looking behind the plane, but for the moment we're just enjoying what's basically a full moon, and it's glass roof, which is always a treat. Okay, so if we look out our windows, we can kind of see some of the towns nearby around the park. I'm going to hop out like this. Now you'll notice below me, you can actually kind of see the desert because it's got this full moon going on, and the simulation will capture that kind of thing. But if I take this and I'm attempting to fly with one hand, so jump forward, let's say 14 days till we get a new moon night, so I can't see the plane anymore. So we'll see how long this lasts, but you can actually look around the park Um, and there we go. So in the game, they simulate the Milky Way, so you can kind of see that sort of setup. But in real life, apparently, it is a beautiful park to go stargazing at because there's no light pollution for miles and miles around. And so I was pleasantly surprised that the game kind of captured some of that essence on here. Let's see if we can pause that briefly while I get set up. So let me show you a photo actually of what I mean by that. So two ones that I'll pull up. The thing to do is to go stargazing, and the park rangers host stargazing outings, I believe. So that's something worth checking out. It's interesting. It's actually designated an international dark sky park. So they went out and took a bunch of measurements in the park and deemed it a gold tier designation, free from all but the most minor impacts of light pollution. So, neat part of the park. All right, so let's do this. So now we've seen a little bit of the nighttime. We're gonna actually jump to sunrise, which is talked about a lot in the park, and you'll see a little bit why, but honestly, it doesn't do it justice. I grabbed a couple photos so you can see a little bit more of what people like about it for nighttime. But let's hop into the plane here. So we're now going backwards of where we're going to be going. So if we can turn this around. Our first stop is Santa Elena Canyon. Now what I'm going to do for this part of the trip is actually fly around a little bit so you can get kind of a, let me see what my, kind of climbing up a little bit here. I'll try not to move my head too much so you kind of get a lay of the land of the park. So again, it's a desert down in the valley here, and mountain ranges all around. So the moon's setting over there. We're actually going to fly over to Santa Elena Canyon, which is just off to the right. And off in the distance, you can see over my left wing is the Chisos Mountains. So that's that mountain range that I keep referencing. That's so famous. All right, I still got all my lights on. It's me now using my iPad so I can actually navigate with something a little more useful. Okay, so now one of the magic questions here is how much of the time do you spend flying versus exploring the park? And given the time we have, I'm going to opt for more time exploring, less time flying. There's little bits and pieces that are pretty fun to do, but let's save that for another day. So one thing that you can do in this game actually pretty easily is if you get your wings level, do something, they call it slewing, but essentially you can kind of translate the plane around the park. So remember we took off from just behind us, and the place we're going, you can see that river just poking out, a little bit of reflection going on. Oops. That's the Rio Grande, and the Rio Grande passes through Santa Elena Canyon, which is this canyon right here. And so if you drop down the Max Roswell Scenic Drive, which is this road, you can see some lights kind of there. At the very end of it, there's a little parking lot. And so we're going to do this just so you can get a sense of the scale of this canyon. So we'll park right next to these guys. Okay, let's see if we can just drop the plane in there. Excellent. Look at that landing. All right, let me pause this real quick. See if I can, I'll tell you what, I can stop my head tracking, I bet. Yeah, that should work. Okay, great. Um, okay, so this is Santa Elena Canyon. Let's talk about that for just a moment while we're here. Couple of really cool photos and lots of information. So if you wanted to go and visit the park, this is a must see destination within it. So let me load up three really pretty cool photos here, and I'll pull them up for you guys to see. And from that, plants. So I will pull this back up. We can watch the sunrise here. I'll zoom out a little bit. Ooh, that's kind of funny perspective on here. Let's see if we can get a better view of the mountains off in the distance. Yep. Okay, do this. I'm just gonna set this up so it's kind of fun to watch while we yeah, why not? Great. Okay. So like I mentioned, there's a lot of different types of plants in the park, and this is due to that climate I was talking about before. So you have the dry and hot deserts that can get from one extreme hot to like over 100 degrees to less than freezing and sometimes. Um, and then the other aspect you have going on, actually on the stream, you can see just off to the bottom right of my compass on the screen of the Chisos Mountains, and those are a sky island. And so if you look up photos of the Chisos Mountains, you'll see it's rich with moisture, there's often fog, and that kind of moisture-rich environment brings in a lot of very unique types of plants, things that you wouldn't see anywhere else in the world. Um, so one of the big ones being the Chisos oak is the only place it occurs in the United States is in the Chisos Mountains. Um, all right, let me see if I can pull up this section about plants real quick. So I mentioned that there's over 1,200 species of plants due to the kind of extremes that you see across the park. There's an interesting file in here that I'll just pull up so you guys can see it, which talks about the all right, and let's see. Uh, when you share other screen, your audio cuts. Oh, okay, cool. That's good to know. I'm catching up on chat now. Totally was cut. I was so confused last time we did that. Okay, well, let's see if we can fix that then. Huh? How's that? Can you hear me now? Excellent. Thank you very much for the heads up. Um, okay, so that's one part of the vegetation scene here. There's lots of different types of cactus. It's the kind of place where it's a big desert, and then all of a sudden life just pops out of everywhere, and you'll see these splashes of colors and really really interesting unique plants. So I'll pull up one here real quick. This is a prickly pear cactus, and you can kind of see the rest of the park off in the distance. And let's see if I can load this one up. Um, I'm going to say this wrong, but I'll attempt it anyway. This is an Osatillo plant. You can see the spelling in the bottom left here. So this is really interesting. This is actually the Osatillo with leaves, and it grows these tiny, tiny leaves when there's enough value, I guess, to having leaves. But most of the time, it's actually totally bare. And then eventually, it will produce little color. I don't remember if it's flowers or fruit, but it'll produce something kind of at the end of these stems. So it's this real weird, like kind of alien looking thing with these tiny, tiny leaves on it. Okay, so lots and lots of desert life. There's a ton of stuff going on in the mountains, and when I was prepping for this, one thing I'll mention that's really cool, if you didn't know, the National Park Service puts out a lot of photos and other really cool resources that are all in the public domain from the government sites. And so almost all the photos that I ended up adding to the wiki page come from the National Park Service. And so what I was finding, I don't know why, maybe I was just searching the wrong spot, but a lot of the photos I was finding were from desert plants and not so much in the Chisos Mountains. So if you go and poke around some of those, they're pretty cool. Anything else that I wanted to highlight on the plant section? Oh yeah, there's another one that's really interesting. So there's this Candelilla, which I feel like I'm saying wrong, wax plant. It was a big deal for the park for a couple of reasons, but this plant allowed people to actually make wax out of it. They could make perfumes and that sort of thing. And so it became a resource that the park was providing that ended up leading to settlements like Glen Springs is one that comes up. There's a big raid actually that occurred at Glen Springs. And so some really interesting, when I talk about the history of the park, some really interesting things that came because of the unique plants that grow there. So, all right, well, that's probably enough about plants. What do you say we hop back in here? Let me see if I can turn on my head tracking again. Yeah, I'm going to leave it off, actually. It's a little too nauseating and a little bit easier to control with the control wheel here. So I'll zoom in on my map here so you guys can actually see where we're headed next. This next dot that I have loaded up is Castellone. Castellone is a historic settlement, and it's just on the Rio Grande. But let's do this one proper because it's beautiful. It's sunrise, and we got the Rio Grande just in front of us here. Let's see if we can pop in. All right. We are cruising well above what this plane is supposed to fly at. So excellent work, everyone. All right, so if we look off to our right, this is where the head tracking is kind of helpful. There's your Santa Elena Canyon. Keep ourselves flying over the Rio Grande. You can kind of see it, and I actually really liked this view at sunrise, the aerial view, because you can kind of see how the Rio Grande snakes. The glittering of the water reflects really well, I thought. All right, and off to our left, then you can kind of see the Chisos Mountains. Make sure I'm orienting myself correctly. So kind of behind that that wall there, you can see them off in the distance. All right. Do a quick chat check, and everything is yep. So all signs are a yep. Okay. All right, so I don't know if you guys are hearing the airplane or not. Let me check something real quick, actually. Oh, I didn't turn on for people to come and join. Um, nope, just you. Oh, I can't hear it either, actually. Um, so, all right, well, that's a problem for next time. Um, there must be some way to turn on other traffic, though. Model miscellaneous. When does the this is Among Us, dude. This is just the intro. All right. Well, I hope those of you who are flying along are having a good time. I apologize for not adding in um, global traffic. It's probably not worth popping out just to do that right now. But if there's a way to do it from in the game, feel free to let me know in the chat. I'll drop in there. All right. So you have successfully watched almost an entire sunrise at Big Bend National Park. All right, so a couple things to point out here. The Rio Grande, you can see right there. Alongside it, you can see this road. This is the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive. I think I called it a different name earlier, but it's the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive. So when you go to the park, you should make sure to check out this one. It's the way that you get to the Santa Elena Canyon, so it's kind of a common road to take. And we're actually going to follow it for a moment because there's two places along it that we're going to go and see. See all that vegetation. So much plant life. All right, Santa Elena Canyon off a distance. Or a number. Okay, now down here, you can see there's this little settlement of a couple buildings. This is, let's see if I can pause here. Oops. So this is the Castellone Historic District. The Historic District, I went and pulled up some photos and I'll see if I can grab one real quick here. Is interesting for a lot of reasons. It's got a really rich history. I'm going to do a summarized version of it because as I started getting to the details on the wiki page and pulling some of these things in, it's a long and difficult without a history course sort of history to cover. So I won't even attempt to here. If you're interested, though, the wiki page has a lot more information, and it's pretty cool. Castellone itself is a historic district in the park. It has a convenience store sort of in the center. I'm going to get this wrong. I don't know if it's cheating if I pull up the wiki page, but I totally did. All right, Castellone is divided into two areas. Old Castellone has the Old Castellone store. And then the store itself is then divided into two halves. So if my memory serves, and I hate relying on my memory, but that's okay, we'll do it for this round. This long building that you see in the center is the Old Castellone store, and it's split in half. So there's two different things going on there. One is a cafe residence, the other side is a shed, I believe. The Castellone Historic District itself, this I believe is from Bing data from 2014. In 2019, there was a fire that started on the other side of the Rio Grande, hopped the Rio Grande, and there was strong winds, and it was temperatures of like 110 that day. And so that fire spread, let me see if I can point off in the direction. So it kind of came from this direction and spread over to the town and destroyed much of the historic district here. This is May of 2019, so it's still pretty recent. The park is figuring out what they want to do to try and preserve as much as they can. I didn't grab any photos of it or anything like that. If you want to go and look, it's pretty thoroughly burnt. Related to the plants I was mentioning before, what happens when the plants all dry out is they're super dry and ripe for fire. What they hadn't anticipated with this particular fire, though, is some of the, or maybe had anticipated it, but what ended up happening was the invasive plants to the area were much less widely dispersed, and because they were so close together, the fire was able to pass across the entire area very quickly, and so it consumed much of the town much more quickly than they were expecting. So they kind of knew that it was a high risk day, but a lot of things went wrong all at once. So the quote is: "A sudden wind direction change with strong gusts showered embers across the Castellón Historic District, igniting the latrine building and barracks, which housed the La Hermina store and visitor center." That was the one I was trying to remember. This resulted in widespread damage to both buildings. So, but we get a preserved version of that history here, so we can kind of see at least a little bit of what it looked like from the time. This was a lot of other photos. So if you're looking for kind of fun historic photos, this one's a really good one. All right, let's keep flying here. So we're going to keep driving down the, or flying down the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive here. The bit I'll mention real quick on the, let's see why my flaps are all not interesting. The short version that I pulled out is actually from an article in the LA Times. And I really liked the quote. So I'm gonna read this to you because I think it summarizes the kind of history of the park pretty astutely. So if it belonged to anyone, this expanse of high desert was once the domain of the nomadic Chisos Indians, who were killed off by the Apaches, who were defeated by the Spanish, who were run off by the Comanches, until white settlers imported repeating rifles and put an end to all debate of who owned what. So 6 different flags have claimed the land that composes Big Bend National Park, but the arid Chihuahuan limestone soil resists most attempts at settlement. The Spanish called it El Despoblado. I should have asked my wife before I attempted to pronounce that one. I got lessons on most of the other ones, but I missed that one. Oh well. Which means I'm going to attempt it again. El Despoblado. It means the uninhabited land. So for most of its history, the 800,000 acres belong to the wild. So that's from an article, Stunning Beauty of Big Bend National Park Stretches Across 2 Countries. Could it survive a wall? So it's a political article, but the intro is good. Okay, so let's quickly, while we're driving, so we're actually driving off to what's called Mule Ears. I've deviated slightly from my course here, so I can pull up that map again. You guys can see where we're going. So we're going to an area called Mule's Ears, which is actually those 2 right off in the distance you can see are the Mule's Ears. So that's a land formation and a notable place in the park. It's just off of a hiking trail off of the Ross Maxwell Scenic Drive. And so when you go and visit Santa Elena Canyon on our way back, then you can take this and go and check it out. So we'll stop by a couple of places on our way over to Mule's Ears. Let me see. We got about 15 minutes left, and I like to be punctual, so I may abbreviate some of these different parts here. But an important piece that we shouldn't skip is actually information about the park itself. So just to make sure that I don't miss that, let me pull it on here. So in 1933, the Texas legislature passed legislation to establish Texas Canyons State Park. Later that year, the park was redesignated Big Bend State Park. In 1935, the U.S. Congress passed legislation that would enable the acquisition of the land for a national park. And the state of Texas deeded that land that it had acquired to the federal government. And on June 12th, 1944, Big Bend National Park became a reality. The park opened to visitors on July 1st, 1944. All right, so that's the bit about a bit of the human history of the park. Next up here we have, I kind of overshot where I want to go. Whoops. So we're going to pull back here, do some rather unsafe plane maneuvers, and pull around the corner of this mountain to look at the trailhead. So you can see just off to the right, there's that road where you would park when you go and do the Mule's Ears Trail, and you can kind of see the trail off the left wing there, curving up into the hills. we have been doing plenty of flying, and so I'm going to actually switch into to slew mode here and just zip around the park a bit. Two places that I want to show you. So we come around here, you can see down in this little crevice here, there's this kind of patch of green. This is Mule Ear Spring. And so the spring itself has a lot of vegetation, interesting kind of area to go and see. This is from the National Park website. And so if you go and check it out, you can see kind of a fascinating little study in life in the park. And then and that trail kind of bends around there, so you can kind of pass over. The trail continues here. You can see mule's ears off to the side. And you pass over these hills until you land at the end of the trail, which is this mule's ear right here. Let me show you what this looks like. Now we are since past sunrise, but I will show you instead a sunset photo of mule's ears. So that's sort of, oops, it's a little bit too big. We can go back one. There we go. Kind of see the jagged rock formation and the ears, and they're pretty iconic actually. Even in the game, you can see all of the park. You can see where mule's ears are. I was ending up using it to navigate by, which is, I decided I had to include it because it was distinct enough to see in this kind of reproduction of it. All right, I should check this. Okay. Cool. Okay. So, oops, kind of quickly flying around the park. So I'm going to jump up here now and go a little bit higher. There's that mule ears that we were looking at just a moment ago. Chisos Mountains in the background. We're backtracking a little bit to go along the Rio Grande. So again, Santa Elena Canyon. We picked up the Rio Grande right here is where we kind of peeled off. So we're going to follow this along. And as you follow the Rio Grande along, you come next to, let me fix my iPad here. Come next to Mariscal Canyon. This is one of the canyons along the Rio Grande Wild and Scenic River, which is a designation that the government can give a river. It can be wild, recreational, or scenic, or some combination of it. So not all of the Rio through Big Bend is designated as that, but this section of it is. And so if you wanted to, for instance, go canoeing down the river, which you totally can do, this is where you would start as you go and look at this Rio Grande Wild and Scenic River. So if you're looking for another interesting wiki page, that would be one to check out. Let me show you what this looks like. So you can kind of see vaguely what this would be like if you were there in real life. So this is sort of a view of that same river. You can see a little bit of acetillo, that plant that I mentioned before, and the river in the background. This is near Boquillas Canyon, which we'll come to in just a minute. Okay. Make sure I got my order all right here. Okay. This is the one I wanted to show you. Okay, so that was the river. This is the other one that's kind of cool. I mentioned that you can go canoeing in here. So this is what it looks like in Mariscal Canyon if you were to go canoeing on it. These neat canyon walls. Oops. Okay. Cool. So let's keep going through here. So that one that I just showed you is this canyon. So we're going to kind of zip around. And as we go, we're going to pull off the Rio Grande. We'll just keep following. It's okay. It's not the straightest path to get there, but it's not so bad. And up next is the Rio Grande Village. One thing that I ended up dropping from the stream just for time, and looks like that was a good decision, is the hot springs. There are hot springs in the park. Looking at some of the photos, it looked like a blast. So I can't personally attest, but would highly recommend looking into that if you were to go. And they're kind of just around this area somewhere, right near Rio Grande Village. So up next here we have Rio Grande Village. This is a part of the park to go and stop at I believe there's camping. I think there's a visitor center and some other things there. Um, Let me see what I have jotted down for that. Yes, camping, picnic area, RV hookup. There's the Rio Grande Village Nature Trail, which is just off to the side over here. And this one's a little deformed in the game, but that's okay. So we got a river flowing up a thing. But this bit of the river is the Rio Grande Nature Trail. Now, one thing that stood out to me on this is the I can show, this is a view actually from there while we got it up. So that's what that looks like. That is the view across the nature trail. And you look at it and it's a very, very narrow part of the river. And that is correct. It's a narrow part of the river. And in fact, it's just down the road here is what's called the Boquillas Crossing. And Boquillas Crossing is the official place that you go if you want to cross from Big Bend into Mexico, or vice versa. So these two buildings are they're approximations of what those buildings would look like. Let me see if I can pull up a bit of information real quick on here. Yeah, I'll show you what this one looks like. So this is the actual port of entry. And there's 2 pages on here that are kind of neat. So one I'll show you. This is that Rio Grande crossing that I was mentioning. So it's just the width there. And then this is that port of entry building. So the crossings of the Rio Grande have been changed a little bit. So looking at the time, I don't have a ton of time to go into it much, but after 9/11, a lot of the rules about how you cross the border and the sorts of things changed, and it made it very difficult for the town of Boquillas del Carmen, which is just down the river here a little bit, and would be a place that you would go if you were going to go just for a day trip as a tourist. It made it very difficult for this village because there was no one really crossing the border. They closed it indefinitely. It looks like in May 2002. And then in 2013, April 2013, the Boquillas Port of Entry reopened. So it is open now. There's a number of rules if you're going to cross the border worth looking into. Honestly, it seemed pretty cool. The other one that sounded really neat was going canoeing down this river. It was not something that would have crossed my mind. That also has some border crossing rules you got to be careful of, but worth looking into if that's up your alley. Okay, I will skip a little bit on the border crossing. One thing that I'll just passing mention is there's been a lot of efforts around making a Mexico-United States International Park. The idea with this being that you'd have something that crosses on both sides of the Rio Grande and becomes sort of like joint cooperative park that would work together. There's been a lot of back and forth discussion on that for a while. And I won't go into it right now, but there's a wiki page called Mexican United States International Park if you're curious to learn more. Okay. Okay, so we'll do this really quick. So while you're at the Rio Grande Village, which I'm totally not seeing, there we go. One of the reasons that people like me down here, especially from the nature trail, this park that I mentioned, is at sunset, you get a beautiful view of the Chisos Mountains off in the distance. And then you get a beautiful view of the Sierra del Carmen mountain range off to your right. So we're a little past sunrise now, but that would be a very cool thing to get up and go see. All right, this off just past Rio Grande Village is Boquillas Canyon. It looks real wonky in the game, so let me pull up a photo. You guys can see what it actually looks like. That's not the one I wanted. Oh, I wanted to mention real quick the animals in the park. So there's a lot of different types of animals. For the sake of time, so this is Boquillas Canyon if you were going to go and canoe it. If I recall correctly, this is the easier of the two. I made a Boquillas Canyon wiki page with a little bit of information if you're curious to learn more. But my memory of it was that this is the one that people are going to recommend. For easier well, it depends what you want, but for an easier time, that would be the way to go. Okay, so we're gonna keep going over here, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to actually do the Chisos Mountains properly. So I'm gonna fly over the Sierra del Carmen's here, and just zip our way up to what is called the Persimmon Gap. So I mentioned, oops, you can't even see on my map anymore. But we're gonna go kind of way up in the corner here. So the Persimmon Gap is where you'd enter the park if you were gonna drive in from this direction. But the really interesting part of it is actually this line of mountains is from a fault, like tectonic plate sort of created this range right here. I don't know if it's technically a range or what exactly it defines as. And there's photos that kind of show, the direction of the rock here. That sun glare is kind of annoying. That's funny. Let's zip it ahead a couple hours now. There's actually some pretty cool photos showing how you can see the fault line out of these. I believe it's like the fault, this sort of green area, the fault is moving up that direction from the North American and South American plates a long time ago. It's something like that. I originally was planning on doing a whole part of this about geology, and the whole like geologist nightmare piece. As a non-expert, it was quite a bit more than I wanted to sign up for. So we're gonna breeze past that, but I will say that there are a lot of interesting readings and stuff to check out if you are so inclined. All right, so let's keep going. So now we're flying across the park. We're gonna actually make our way to Chisos Mountains. First up here is Panther Junction. So this is the headquarters of the park. So if you're gonna go visit, this is where you would go for your main one. Just down in Panther Junction. You can then drive your way up to the Chisos Basin. You take this road and then you kind of hike your way up here. Now, this is actually a very pretty part of the park. And so we're gonna flip out of this slew mode real quick and just kind of enjoy it. So let me see if there's any other ones that I wanted to pull up. There's a couple of things you're going to see off to the right, which I'll talk about now as we're flying through this gap here. The Chisos Basin itself has a visitor center and a camp up there. The view from the camp is along what's called, just called the Window in a lot of places. I don't know if that's the official name, but Window Trail would be another thing you might see on the park map. And so as we round this corner here, you'll see the view off into the desert. That's the window. All right. So there's the window just in front of us, and you can see the visitor center and kind of the main buildings in the Chisos Basins then right here. You'll notice we're about 6,000 feet. I don't know what the actual height in this area is, but you can see then right there is kind of the main park visitor center. And like I mentioned, there's the window just off to the distance there. All right. So we're at 8 o'clock here, so I will finish off the next couple of minutes. Oops. I don't know how punctual streams usually are. That would be something to know. So used to watching the time through these kinds of things. Not in a bad way. That sounded bad, but whatever. Okay, so open to Chisos Mountains. Yeah, the Window Trail. What we're going to do last here then is actually fly up to Emery Peak, which is the last dot on our map here. Well, kind of abbreviated some of our destinations, but that's this one right here. So if you fly up this way, you can see, kind of looking at what the highest point is. From certain angles, it is not obvious that this is the highest point, but this one right here is Emery Peak. And from Emery Peak, you get this incredible view of the whole valley. So you can see Santa Elena Canyon off in the distance. We started over at Lajitas International, Santa Elena Canyon. You can see Mule's Ears just off the front of the plane right now, kind of the distance. And then followed the river along where there's multiple canyons. and then eventually made our way back to the Chisos Mountains. So there's the view of the basin. Let me pull up an actual photo here. And see if I can get that. So this is the panoramic view from the top of Chisos Mountains. Is a huge photo. There's a bunch of equipment actually at the top for, I believe, I'm not going to say because I don't remember, but that is up there if you end up going and visiting. There's a trail that takes you all the way up to the top here, and you can see kind of in the shadow of this panorama, you can see the park off to the right. So that's the view from Emery Peak. Well, Santa Elena Canyon off in the distance, the same sorts of things we were just looking at. You can see Mule's Ears and some of the fog coming in. All right, so let's do this for the last little bit here. I'm going to get us set up for a sunset view of the park. Turn off our map, I suppose. We don't need that. Let's say that we go and look. Where is my... There we go, Santa Elena Canyon. We'll zip that ahead and just give it kind of a little bit of nice glow, a little send-off sunset. All right, so that's all for today. Thank you all so much for joining. It was wonderful to have you. I will put a survey in the chat. Let me see if I can do that now so I don't forget. And then someone who is better at this than I am should eventually let me know how to do like show notes or something where I can actually attach it later. But I'll try and get something up real quick so that people can give a bit of input. What else? I bet I copied it here. Okay, whatever. I'll send it out to you guys later. I think I know for the most part who's on. So that's it. Thanks all. Let me see. I'm going to do a cheesy sign off because got to do one. So in a world full of adventures, I'm glad I could share this one with you. So thank you for being my co-pilot today. All right, that's all. See you guys later.